Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a monumental, absolutely action-packed clash that literally changed the course of history forever. We're talking about the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD. You know, this isn't just another dry date in a history book. Not at all. This is the unbelievable story of a catastrophic military disaster that completely shattered the myth of Roman invincibility and laid the very groundwork for the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Okay, let's dive right into this. Did a mismanaged refugee crisis and the sale of rotten dog meat really trigger the collapse of the mighty Roman war machine? I know, it sounds entirely absurd, right? Almost like some dark historical fiction. But it is an absolute historical fact. Today, we're going to explore exactly how a desperate local humanitarian emergency, fueled by unimaginable corruption and imperial arrogance, spiraled out of control into an empire-ending catastrophe. Part 1. The Roman refugee crisis. To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the disaster at Adrianople, we've got to set the stage first. The year is 376 AD, and the Eastern Roman Empire is sitting on a massive socio-political powder keg. The borders of the ancient world are shifting rapidly, and the Roman frontier is about to face pressure unlike anything it has ever seen before. Back in the 370s AD, this terrifying new force emerged from the eastern steppes, the Huns. And they swept into Europe like an absolute whirlwind, completely uprooting the Gothic tribes who were living north of the Black Sea. Desperate just to survive, tens of thousands of Gothic refugees, men, women, and children, fled westward, straight to the banks of the Danube River. In 376 AD, they literally begged the Eastern Roman Emperor Valens for asylum. Seeing an easy opportunity to boost his tax base and recruit some fresh soldiers, Valens agreed. He allowed them to cross the river into Roman territory. But the logistics were an absolute nightmare, and things deteriorated almost immediately. Now, the Roman officials who were actually in charge of this resettlement, commanders Lupicinus and Maximus, were spectacularly incompetent and blindingly corrupt. Instead of providing the food and land they had promised, they deliberately starved the massive Gothic encampments just to extort them. The situation became so horrific that these corrupt officials literally forced the starving refugees to trade their own children into slavery just for portions of rotten dog meat. I mean, it was an act of profound malice, and it turned a desperate refugee population into a furious, radicalized mob. Part 2. Rebellion and Rival Leaders. That unimaginable cruelty brought the whole situation to a boiling point. The Goths had been pushed way past the brink of human endurance, and for them, survival now meant open rebellion. But to understand the war that followed, we really have to look at the two men steering their respective factions onto this collision course. Now, what's really interesting about this is the stark contrast in leadership. You've got Emperor Valens, who honestly wasn't a natural soldier. He was heavily reliant on his advisors, wildly jealous of his young nephew, the Western Emperor Gratian, and frankly, he was desperate for some personal military glory. Facing him was Fritigern, the leader of the Goths, cunning, charismatic, and a brilliant tactician who genuinely cared for the survival of his people. He wasn't just some barbarian warlord, he was a master manipulator of Roman political weaknesses. So, the final spark of the rebellion? It actually happened at a luxury banquet in Adrianople. Lupicinus, yep, that same corrupt commander from earlier, invited Fritigern and the other Gothic leaders to a feast, supposedly to discuss food supplies. Well, it was a trap. Lupicinus ordered his soldiers to butcher the Gothic bodyguards right then and there. However, Fritigern actually managed to fight his way out of the city. Enraged by this huge betrayal, Fritigern rallied his warriors, and a furious Gothic rebellion instantly erupted. They put the entire Roman province of Thrace to the sword. Part 3. Hubris on the battlefield. Let's fast forward through 2 grueling years of bloody guerrilla warfare and a completely plundered countryside, right to the summer of 378 AD. Emperor Valens has finally marched his massive field army out from the capital. The Roman and Gothic forces are converging near the city of Adrianople, perfectly setting the stage for a decisive winner-take-all confrontation. And this right here is where Valens makes a sequence of absolutely fatal errors, driven entirely by his own hubris. See, he has roughly 15,000 to 20,000 elite veteran troops. His nephew, Emperor Gratian, has just won a major victory in the west and is marching rapidly to reinforce him. Valens's top generals literally beg him to just wait for Gratian's army. But Valens? He's blindingly jealous of his nephew's recent successes. Plus, he's been tricked by faulty scouting reports that way underestimated the Gothic numbers. So, wanting all the glory for himself, he flat out refuses to wait and marches his men directly toward the enemy. Picture this. It's the morning of August 9th. Valens forces his army into a grueling 8-mile trek. It's the absolute height of the Mediterranean summer. Temperatures are soaring around 40 degrees Celsius, and these Roman legionaries are marching uphill over rugged terrain, fully weighed down by all their heavy armor and shields. By the time they actually arrive at the Gothic camp, which by the way was a massive fortified circle of wagons known as a loggia, the Romans are already completely exhausted, parched, and desperately hungry. And this brilliantly illustrates Fritigern's tactical genius. Seeing these exhausted Romans, he doesn't just attack right away. Instead, he stalls. He sends out fake peace envoys to negotiate a truce. So while the Romans are just standing there, baking in the intense afternoon sun, trapped in their heavy armor, the Goths deliberately set the surrounding dry grass and crop fields on fire. Thick smoke billows straight into the Roman lines, severely worsening their dehydration and heat exhaustion. But Fritigern isn't just trying to tire them out, you know? He is desperately buying time, waiting for his heavy cavalry who are out foraging to return to the battlefield. Part 4. The Gothic Cavalry Trap. Let's move to the front lines and see how this tension builds. It's immense. The Romans are sweltering, the smoke is choking them, and the supposed peace talks are going absolutely nowhere. The discipline of the usually steadfast Roman army is really beginning to crack under the strain, and then it finally snaps. The battle actually begins completely by accident. Without waiting for any orders from Valens, impatient Roman skirmishers and cavalry on the right wing just snap under the pressure. They launch a rash, uncoordinated attack against the Gothic wagons. I mean, the rest of the Roman army hasn't even finished deploying into its battle lines yet. This spontaneous charge completely shatters Roman discipline and throws their entire formation into disarray right from the very start. And exactly at that disastrous moment, a massive cloud of dust appears on the horizon. It's the returning Gothic cavalry. Around 10,000 heavily armed Elan and Gruthingi horsemen come galloping onto the battlefield. Ancient sources describe them literally sweeping down the hills like a thunderbolt. They crash violently into the overextended, completely unsupported Roman cavalry on the flanks. The Roman horsemen are instantly overwhelmed. They're routed and driven entirely off the battlefield, leaving the Roman infantry completely exposed. What follows, guys? It's pure nightmare fuel. With the Roman cavalry totally gone, the Gothic horsemen wheel right around and smash into the flanks and rear of the Roman infantry. Fritigern's foot soldiers charge out from the wagon circle. The Roman legionaries are completely encircled. They are pushed and crushed together so tightly by the relentless Gothic assault that the men physically cannot even raise their arms to draw their swords or throw their spears. It becomes this claustrophobic, suffocating slaughter under the blazing sun. A total meat grinder from which there is absolutely no escape. Part 5. Fall of Roman Invincibility. As the sun finally sets on the horrifying carnage of Adrianopolis, the immediate aftermath sets in. The short-term losses are obviously devastating, but the long-term, permanent implications for the Roman Empire? They're completely foundational. History had literally just pivoted on its axis. 66%, up to 2/3 of the entire Eastern Roman field army was wiped out in a single afternoon. We're talking about the loss of anywhere from 10,000 to 14,000 elite, completely irreplaceable veteran soldiers. Historians immediately compared the disaster to Cannae, Rome's legendary defeat to Hannibal centuries earlier. The very core of the Eastern Empire's military strength had just evaporated in a matter of hours. And the ultimate grim symbol of this devastating defeat was the fate of Emperor Valens himself. As his elite guards were cut down, the emperor was abandoned on the field. Now, his exact death remains a total mystery. Some accounts say he was simply shot in the face by a random Gothic arrow amidst all the chaos. But there's another much darker account, which suggests he was dragged, badly wounded, into a nearby peasant's cottage. The victorious Goths, completely unaware that the Emperor of Rome was inside, allegedly set the cottage ablaze, burning Valens alive. His body was never recovered. So the crucial point is that the permanent legacy of this battle changed the world in 3 very distinct ways. First, the myth of Roman invincibility was irrevocably shattered. The barbarians now knew, for sure, that Rome could be bled. Second, it accelerated a massive shift in military history, moving dominance away from the famous Roman heavy infantry toward the absolute supremacy of heavy cavalry. And finally, perhaps most importantly, Rome was left so weakened that they couldn't even expel the Goths. Valens' successor was forced to sign a treaty allowing the Goths to settle inside Roman borders as an autonomous, fully armed nation. That was a massive fatal precedent. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to chew on. Did one single afternoon of arrogant hubris at Adrianople inevitably doom the Roman Empire? By inviting an armed, independent nation inside their borders simply because they no longer had the strength to fight them, the Romans set the exact stage for the Visigoths to eventually march on Rome itself just a few decades later in 410 AD. It really goes to show how one bad decision, driven by ego and unchecked corruption, can literally rewrite the map of the world. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning history.